students, welcome back to World History 2. I hope you're doing well today. In today's lesson, we're going to be concluding our look at the Second World War, and we'll be looking at part 6 of our lecture series. Stay tuned for the PowerPoint. On the Second World War, part 6. This is the last lecture on the Second World War. Okay, so now we're back to Japan, and where we left off with Japan previously, the U.S. forces had taken Iwo Jima and Okinawa, kind of really pushing up against the Japanese homeland. And so we're going to pick up there with this PowerPoint lecture. Towards the end of the Pacific War, several military actions displayed the desperation of the Japanese forces. And so as the Allies were continuing to move forward and press against Japan, they got desperate. The first was the Allied offensive in Burma, which was more like the Australians, the British and the Australians were the ones fighting this. But the British were pushing the Japanese back. Now, the reason that this is showing some desperation is that they faced 150,000 Japanese in Burma, and at the end of the Allied offensive in Burma, only 1,700 Japanese survived. Very, very rarely would they allow themselves to be captured. So they basically fought to the death. Or they committed suicide. But the Japanese, again, I mean, so many Japanese soldiers killed in Burma because they just fought to the very last. There was the attack on the Japanese home islands, which we talked about this before, the Battle of Iwo Jima and the Battle of Okinawa. Again, 21,000 Japanese on Iwo Jima. Not a very large island. It's like 8 miles long. Not a very large island. But only 3,000 of them survived, so 18,000 killed. Now, Iwo Jima was also a very deadly battle for the United States. There were about 8,000 Marines killed on Iwo Jima. So it was a very deadly island. 21,000 Japanese fought there, only 3,000 survived. Battle of Okinawa, 110,000 Japanese there, and only 7,400 survived. So again, just very deadly. The Japanese would not be taken prisoner. They did crazy charges against the U.S. forces who would kill them. There are also a lot of stories of civilians who would not be taken captured. Like in Okinawa, there's stories of civilians jumping off of cliffs and all kinds of crazy things. The attack on the Japanese home islands were really causing desperation for the Japanese. So what happens is they begin these kamikaze attacks. The kamikaze attacks are the airplanes being purposely driven into U.S. naval ships. Now, don't think the kamikaze attacks were going on during the entire war. The kamikaze attacks were only towards the very end of the war because the Japanese were using their planes for air warfare, and they would bomb the American ships or the British ships. They would bomb the American islands that the Americans had taken. But now towards the end of the war, they're becoming very desperate, and so now they're crashing their planes into the ships just to cause maximum damage. Kamikaze attacks, it means divine wind. The Japanese would have these special attack units whose sole aim is to cause maximum damage to U.S. forces by suicide, where they would crash the plane into the ship, whether to try to sink the ship or hit their magazine or take out planes on the deck or catch the deck on fire. Most of them were made of wood. The decks were made of wood. If they could just do that, then they could just bring maximum damage. It occurred during the closing stages of the war. Like I said, it just shows the desperation that the Japanese were at because there were about 3,800 pilots killed, and obviously that means their planes were 3,800 planes, if you will. So it was a complete waste of men and material. I mean, if you're killing all your pilots like this, who's going to be left to even defend the homeland of Japan in case there's an invasion by the U.S. forces, which there was going to be a planned invasion? And in the end, they only killed about 7,000 naval personnel. And again, that's a lot of sailors. I'm not trying to make light of that. 7,000 sailors is a lot. But if you think about the cost of Japan with the pilots who they had to train to fly, pilots and the planes, which now they're limited with planes now because they have to keep making new planes and they're being firebombed every other day by U.S. forces. It was a complete waste, and they didn't get the outcome that they wanted. On the screen here, we have an interesting picture. This is Kiyoshi Ogawa, and this is a picture taken of him just prior to him taking off on a kamikaze attack, and he actually ran his plane into the USS Bunker Hill. And so we have a picture of him before he takes off, and then on the right-hand side, I know it's kind of pixely because I kind of blew it up a little bit, but the USS Bunker Hill, this is the damage that Ogawa caused on the aircraft carrier after he crashed his plane into the deck of the aircraft carrier. This is Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki. He's about to take off in his plane. He was the last kamikaze pilot to crash, and he crashed his plane an hour after Japan surrendered on August 15th, 1945. Okay, so there was a planned invasion of Japan that never happened. And I just want to run down through this quickly. It was codenamed Operation Downfall, and it was set to begin in November of 1945. So obviously, Japan surrendered before that. The reason it's important to talk about this is because the dropping of the atomic bombs stopped this invasion. So it saved a lot of Allied forces from death. It was supposed to happen in two stages. The first stage, by using Okinawa as a staging area, the Allies would invade the southern portion of Japan in Operation Olympic. And they estimated that they were going to be facing 900,000 Japanese soldiers on the southern islands of Japan. And then stage 2 was going to be happening later in early 1946, would be the remainder of Japan being invaded, and that was called Operation Coronet. It would have been the largest invasion in history if it did happen, and the plan was to actually bring soldiers from Europe who had just defeated Hitler, bring them over to the Pacific for the invasion of Japan. It was estimated that up to 500,000 Allied soldiers would be killed in the invasion. But as I said, it did not occur because of the atomic bombs that were dropped. So now here's a map of the planned invasion of Japan. So it's called Operation Downfall. And then you have two forces. You have Operation Olympic, which is going to come right here. Okinawa is a staging base. And so they were going to invade down in here and take the southern part of Japan. And then Operation Coronet, which here it says about March 1st, 1946, would be invasion up here by Tokyo. Okay, but as I said, the invasion never happened because of the atomic bomb. We're going to look at that now. The atomic bomb at Hiroshima, August 6, 1945, 3 B-29 aircraft took off for the first atomic attack. The Enola Gay, named after the pilot's mother, had the bomb. The Great Artiste was an instrumentation aircraft, and Necessary Evil was the photographer aircraft. They flew separately from the Mariana Islands until Iwo Jima, and at that time they came together and made the bombing run. Little Boy bomb was dropped at 8:15 in the morning and fell for 44 seconds before detonating 2,000 feet from the ground. It missed the drop point target by 800 feet, and the planes actually traveled 11 miles before they felt the shock waves of the blast. It basically vaporized everything within a 1-mile radius and seriously damaged 4 miles beyond that. 80,000 were killed and 70,000 were injured. So here's a map. Here's the Mariana Islands. I guess they took off from Tinian. They went to Iwo Jima, and then once they passed Iwo Jima, they went on. They bombed Hiroshima, and then they returned. We'll come back to this map in a little bit. Here's the crew of the Enola Gay. Here's the little boy bomb. That was on the front of this PowerPoint. Here's the blast of the bomb on Hiroshima, the famous mushroom cloud. Here's a picture of Hiroshima after the blast. On this photograph that I took off of Google, you have Paul Tibbets. He was the pilot. His mother was Enola Gay. He was a colonel in the U.S. It was actually the U.S. Army Air Force. And then he piloted the Enola Gay. But you can see just the devastation, mainly because most of these were wooden structures. And so they were just devastated. Okay, the atomic bomb at Nagasaki, August 9th, 1945. So a couple days later, 3 B-29 aircraft take off. One named Boxcar. Boxcar had the bomb in it. The Great Artiste had instrumentation. And then down here, the Big Stink was an observation plane. That had stayed back a little bit when the bomb was dropped, because they saw it 100 miles away. So Boxcar, the Great Artiste, and the Big Stink, they take off. The Fat Man bomb was dropped at 11:01 a.m. and fell for 47 seconds before detonating at 1,600 feet from the ground. It missed the drop point target by 1.9 miles because of bad winds. It exploded next to the Mitsubishi Steel Works. When the bomb exploded, there were 7,500 people inside the steelwork plant working, and they were all killed, vaporized. Because the bomb dropped off target, it exploded actually further away from where they wanted it, and it was shielded. The city was partially shielded by some mountains. Just the way the layout of the city was. And so where it exploded, the mountains blocked some of the blast. If it had exploded on target, it would have basically devastated the entire city. But instead, it blew up off target, and some of the mountains that kind of encroached into the city blocked some of the blast. So not as many people were killed. But obviously, as you see there on the bottom, 75,000 were killed. And then more than 75,000 died afterwards from radiation. So very deadly, just with the blast, and then obviously with the radiation fallout. The Big Stink observation plane saw it explode 100 miles away. It was a big bomb. So here's the path for Nagasaki. And this is what is interesting, is that Nagasaki was not the primary city. It was actually a secondary city. The primary city was Kokura, right here. Now, Kokura was spared because there was a lot of cloud cover over Kokura. And so what the plane did was, what Boxcar did was they came up through here and then diverted to Nagasaki and dropped the bomb on Nagasaki, and then went to Okinawa and then returned. So if it was a clear day, we would have never talked about Nagasaki. If it was a clear day, we would have been talking about Hiroshima and Kokura. But because of the cloud cover, we always talk about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Here's the crew that dropped the bomb on Nagasaki. So here's the pilot, Sweeney. There's a picture of Fat Man bomb. Here's a picture of the blast. Here's a picture of the bomb damage. So ground zero is where it exploded. Now, it was off target, but that's where it exploded. And so you see before and after, same river. So here's a bridge. Here's that same bridge. Here's a stadium. Looks like a stadium. Okay, so here's the stadium. So it just completely obliterated this area of the city. Japan surrendered on August 15th, 1945 by declaration of the Emperor. The formal surrender was on September 2nd, 1945 on the deck of the USS Missouri. Now, if Japan had not surrendered, the U.S. actually had plans to drop more of the Fat Man bombs. They were planning on one more bomb being dropped in August, on August 19th. 3 Fat Man bombs in September, and then 3 Fat Man bombs in October. So history records, obviously, only the two atomic bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but if they did not surrender, we could be saying a whole list of cities' names that were hit by atomic bombs. But Japan surrendered. Here's a picture of the surrender on the deck of the USS Missouri. Japan surrendering, everyone's celebrating. There's a very famous picture of the Navy guy there kissing the nurse. That's a very famous picture. That's in Times Square, New York. There's some kids, some people with newspapers that the war has ended. And that's it for this last PowerPoint for the Second World War. All right, class, that's it for today. Next time we'll be looking at the post-World War II war crime trials. I'll see you then.